Ryan Honick, I wanted to talk to you because, first of all, you're a really interesting and fun person to talk to, just on an ongoing basis of just friendship. But also, I think your story is really interesting. And for anyone watching who doesn't know who Ryan Honick is, he is a disability advocate. He's a speaker and a professional persuader on your Twitter, which sounds amazing. I think I might need some, tips and tricks with that for
Absolutely.
my own persuading needs. Um, but I kind of thought, there it's kind of a serendipity kind of moment because when we scheduled this time to talk, I didn't have it in my head that today is the 32nd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you are someone who actually is a huge advocate for it. So, what is I don't know, what does today kind of mean for you? Maybe not even just like this day, but just the fact that it even exists.
Well, so I think of, well, first of all, for all the platitudes and all the nice things you said, I feel like I could spend 20 minutes doing the same thing in reverse. But
Ah, that's why
because
I'm interviewing you, by the way. That's the
yeah,
whole reason.
we're gonna do one for you next time.
Okay.
But to your question, you know, I think there's a lot that kind of goes through my head. I mean, all of July is Disability Pride Month, so it tends to be front and center for a lot of folks throughout the entire month. But then today, of course, is the actual day that the legislation was signed, and it's created a lot of opportunity and a lot of doors have been opened metaphorically and otherwise for disabled folks. But this morning, I was talking to friends of mine, and we were actually lamenting the fact that as great as that is, like it was signed into law by George Herbert Walker Bush in 1990.
Mhm.
Um, and my first thought was, today's Republican Party would never sign this.
Oh,
Like
you think so?
today's Republican Party is so like they're actually angry that it exists. Like they think it goes too far, right? Like I think there's a misconception that the ADA is like some magical fairy blanket that makes everything wonderful, and so it's like
Set
this.
in stone as well, right?
It's
Like,
set in stone. Like, what are you advocating for? You have this law. Like, go home. And I think the thing that a lot of people forget or don't or just aren't even initially aware of is that the law exists, but the implementation of it, the enforcement of it is so lax that it's like we still have to fight and remind folks that like this law exists, but like people need to follow it, and the consequences aren't really there for people that don't. Like there's a misconception that you can sue this company for not being ADA compliant, or you can sue them for right. And reality is like legally the victory, if you sue an organization or you sue a firm or you sue a corporation, the victory is forced compliance, meaning you didn't do this thing you should have done, and now we sued you, and now you have to do the thing, right? There's no like monetary win. There's no like $1 million windfall because something happened. Like my advocacy is rooted in all the things that I've continued to fight for on behalf of myself and other folks, including rideshare, including getting access to places that I go to regularly that aren't accessible. Even just this morning, I had a conversation with um, the manager at the local Starbucks because I've been dealing with the district team and district manager about making those places more accessible, within my neighborhood. So just basic access is still a fight. And so today is just a reminder to be like, hey, our megaphone's a little louder today and this month, so like pay attention. Ooh, over here, right?
mhm. Well, for people who don't know who you are, kind of off the top of their heads, what is your disability?
So I have cerebral palsy, which like a lot of disabilities comes kind of as a spectrum, right? So it can affect people in a lot of different ways. I tend to jokingly call my version of it CP light. Like the version that got me was very um, like on the whole scale is pretty mild. Um, so for me, it just means I have a lot of fine motor issues. I don't walk so good. I can't really see it, but I'm sitting in a nice tricked out wheelchair, which took 2 years to get through insurance and a lot of paperwork. So that's the other thing too. It's like,
Wow.
we think about certain things and making the argument for advocacy, and obviously gun control is very pertinent. And a lot of advocates are making this parallel in the last few months. You know, it takes people like me, 2+ years with insurance to get our chair the way we need it to, and it takes anybody, 5 seconds to go get an AR-15 at Walmart. Like,
Right.
why is that the reality we're living in, right?
It's true. I was thinking about how I take for granted the fact that I can go get into an Uber and just order one, get in one, and head out. But I saw a video of you on, I think it was on Twitter,
Yep, that's where they all
I
live.
believe.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
the Twitter land. They that shows you're wanting to just have that basic right with your dog Pico and the resistance you receive. So will you talk a little bit about that, what that's like for you?
So that journey. So I've had Pico since 2014. So it's been 8 years. He's actually 10. I got him when he was 2. Um, Shout out to Canine Companions who are amazing. Love them. Do a lot of advocacy on behalf of them and Pico and myself. Um, but that's when the sort of rideshare thing became so prevalent to me, because they had only been um, really prevalent in market share for a couple of years at that point, at least in DC, right? And then they kind of blew up over time. But what also came with that is realizing that like the education around service animals and kind of the role they play in the lives of their handlers, um, and then like driver education, because there's a whole labor angle for like these guys aren't working for a company, they're independent contractors, what that means for
Their
sort of
own car,
what that means
right?
for exactly what that means for the legal landscape. And then you have the company, which is supposed to abide by the ADA. So lots of conversations. And initially, my advocacy started with, I'd file complaints with Uber or Lyft or whomever, and it became a debate as he said, she said, I said this happened, they said this, and it was like, okay, well, prove it. Like, okay, but
Mm.
now we're all walking around with our phones in our pockets, and so I started to document in 2018. We're talking 4 years after I got matched with Pico. I started literally documenting every single ride, screenshotting, taking records, and I got accused of basically that I was baiting these drivers, right? That I was doing all this for the cloud, and that I was baiting these guys to get. It's like, no, this is what I have to do to prove that my experience is legit, right? Not dissimilar to folks that started filming other things in this country because they needed proof of what's going on. Like, that's just the climate we live in. If you can't prove it, if you can't film it and prove it, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Um,
Did did you find that it was that it has become easier for you in the 4 years since you filmed it, or is it the same?
Honestly, no. Um, and I thought, and it's definitely garnered national attention. I've made headlines for it. I've definitely
What
become.
kind of headlines?
I think
What
I,
headline?
I think I've become known for it. To be honest with you, like which sounds really braggy. It's not really my. As much as I love my advocacy getting attention, it's not. I don't do it for attention. I do it because it needs to be done, and I thankfully at this moment have the spoons to do it. Some days more than others, but the headlines. I mean, I've gone on. It started with local news, and then I got. That led to conversations with folks like the Washington Post and Fox News National, and the this other firm now this to do all the virtual videos and sort of social videos on advocacy efforts and everything else. So it's definitely garnered attention. It's gotten the attention of folks, but has it really changed the metrics? Unfortunately, I don't think so. Um, so
If you knew then that it really wasn't going to change too much of a metric, would you still have gone through the process of exposing some of
oh,
these?
100%, and I still do because I feel like if it's kind of like, I mean, the closest parallel I have is like people thinking about voting, right? It seems like a really weird parallel, but I guess it's like I think about it in terms of voting. It's like people say if the one vote doesn't make a difference. Well, if everybody thought like that, well then nobody would vote, and the whole thing goes to hell. Um, and so I think the thing that I've learned about my advocacy, and I think most folks can. I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but I describe it as a process that's sometimes slow and glacial, and sometimes not always linear, and occasionally backward, right? But absolutely, you continue to do it because what's the other choice? It's indifference and apathy and surrender.
I wonder if I have that thought about different aspects of my life where I can already go to like, well, it's probably not going to make a difference. You know what I mean? And then I just do nothing, and I'm not really proud of that. So I admire that you you are passionate enough about this to take chances and to make some noise and to garner attention, well-deserved
Thank you.
attention.
And it's hard because some days you're just tired. Like how many different days and ways can you beat the same drum? But
Mm,
and I think
that you've been beating for a while.
but it's definitely, I think, and thankfully, it's not just me, and there's other advocates that are doing different things, and so you see them and you're like, okay, I feel less alone, right? I have other disabled advocates that are working just as hard with just as few spoons, and you feel like you're part of a collective and you're not just out there yelling at the wind. Although sometimes it can feel like that.
Well, I was wondering how many people who are in a similar situation as yours, whatever their disability is, what it's like for them to feel powerless. And are there some words that you could share with them to encourage them to even in a small sense, make noise? Because like you're saying, a collective voice can be very loud, but a singular voice can feel silent.
Yeah, I think the wisdom, honestly, is patience, right?
It sounds so passive, doesn't
Like
it?
it sounds passive and it sounds like it's not helpful. It's like, um, but it's just like I said, it's a slow and sometimes glacial and not always linear process. But you see cracks in
Mm,
what you're trying to do. You see slow, small cracks, and you're like, okay, the glass ceiling or whatever metaphor you want to use, you see it breaking slowly, and you do it brick by brick or whatever the metaphor is, right? And slowly but surely, you've built the wall if you just keep
right.
doing it.
What do you think makes you heard or different compared to someone else who may be experiencing similar things? In other words, I've seen that you have different ways that you're on the internet. You are on blogs and you help a lot of different people in even relationships and what it's like to be a disabled person, not just the logistics of your life. But how does that happen for you? Like because I find you're just fun to talk to for me anyway, but I'm just thinking there's like a little gift you have that allows people to kind of really pay attention to your words,
I
I
really
think.
I appreciate that's actually very kind and very very powerful and encouraging for you for to hear that. Um,
Well, it's true. Thanks
particularly
though.
particularly because I feel like when the advocacy gets, there's a feeling oftentimes of like, yes, we are supported by other advocates all the time in places, and it's like there's this feeling of this echo chamber, right? It's like we're all lifting each other up, but like, is the message getting to where it needs to go? And so when I hear something like that from you, it's okay. Yes, it is. It's hitting. It's like we need the message. The message is what it is, but we need the messengers sometimes to be able-bodied people because they're the ones who are actually taken more seriously, can actually get things done oftentimes faster than we can because unfortunately disabled voices aren't always given the weight that they should be. um,
So why what so how did you, I guess what I'm asking in a roundabout way is how did you get involved in advocacy to the level where you even are now? Like you are listened to. You have an award on LinkedIn right now. That
which
what
is
did it come out today?
no, it
What
came out on, I think, Thursday, right? So it's been a couple
uh,
days.
well,
um,
to get used to your fame, that's what I say.
I mean, fame is relative, but I
I
appreciate. No,
it
like
is.
it's great. Like
Wait,
it.
what's your award? Let's say what your award is.
Oh, yep. Sorry, it's the
It's okay.
officially it's top 12 voices in advocacy, um, as curated by the editors of LinkedIn, I guess.
Well,
Um,
that's amazing. How, given how many people are on LinkedIn, I don't even know, millions, I'm certain,
yeah,
millions and millions. But still, that's quite an accolade for you, and gives a little even more weight to some of your words.
it also adds
But
pressure, but
yeah, it does. Be careful what you wish for, kind of thing.
does he deserve this banner? I don't know. Let's go check his feet
I don't deserve nothing either, so we're just doing the best we can here. But
out.
listen, so your why do you have why did this happen, do you think? Like, I'm considering someone else, I guess. I'm just like almost playing a devil's advocate. Let's say that there's someone who feels these things but has not sort of used social media this way or even has the command of the English language that you do. Like, what happened that got you here
I
to
think
have this award?
I think a couple of things. I don't think it's a singular. event. I think it's a culmination of a lot of things, as much of life tends to be. It's not a single thing.
Truth.
One, I have always had a passion for language, so like being able to communicate effectively is super important to me. Um, I went to school to study words, right, and play with words, and also by extension play with not just the words but communicating those words. And my master's degree is in communication, so a lot of that has to do with communication and persuasion and various things. Um, but then it also from a disability, so that explains the comms piece. Um, and then the advocacy really was born out of just pure survival, right? It wasn't like I didn't set out to, and I think, and I can't speak for everybody else, but I think I I'm not too far off in saying that I think a lot of advocates, um, it's not a hey, look at me, I'm doing all the stuff. It's a survival mechanism. There are so many people, particularly on Twitter, where so much of the internet lives for both good and ill, that says, hey, like, stop complaining, go out there and live your life. And it's like, I'm actually complaining so that I can do exactly that, right? There's so much that is not accessible or not easy to navigate, and exactly why we're doing this is because of that. It's trying to minimize that and create access in spaces. So they're part and parcel to each other. And so it happened as a byproduct of saying, hey, the more, as you say, the single voice is not always as helpful and as loud as the collective. And very slowly, inch by inch, brick by brick, glass ceiling by glass ceiling piece, one thing led to somebody else tweeted this. Hey, I had that thought too. You feel less alone. Suddenly the amplification of the work within the disability community, and then slowly you get folks like you who are allies who are saying, hey, this is actually really cool. And then, it doesn't always happen that way, but I've been fortunate to make a lot of change, both locally and nationally, with a lot of different corporations. I continue to fight with Uber and Lyft, but slowly policy changes happen there. I've done the same with, one of my very first pieces of advocacy was against Petco, of all places.
Where the pets go, or
Where,
whatever it is.
well,
Is that what it is?
where the pets tried to go in this case.
Oh.
They told me that I couldn't be in the back room where they were doing the grooming because they didn't want folks back there. Legally, it was kind of it's legally it's a cut and dry thing, honestly. Like, the law says that I'm allowed to go, or Pico is allowed to go anywhere that I'm allowed to go, right? That's what the law says. And their argument was, but we don't let humans back there. They're being the grooming area. And my counter to them was, okay, letter of the law, spirit of the law. You're telling me that a place that works with animals, and in this case with Pico, it's a service that I'm not allowed back there to ensure that he's properly, handled and dealt with by your groomers. And it became, that was my very first national campaign. And
How did it go? So what was it like to take on such a giant?
it was a change.org petition that started in 2014. It led to them actually ultimately sort of caving, insofar as their official response from their PR team was, we will adapt this policy to let Ryan back there. Excuse me.
Just you?
And I was like, that's great. That's literally that's step one. But there are, there's 20% of the global population that has a disability, and of those, there's, I don't have the math in front of me at the moment, but of those, a good chunk of them are also service dog handlers. There's, I think I remember the stat being something in the neighborhood of 400,000 service dog teams as of, I think, 2018. The numbers probably increased a lot since.
And you're still the only one who's allowed to go back there with your dog?
And last time I checked, I'm still the only person that has a certified thing from Petco saying this is the guy, right?
So, do you ever think about, you talk about the spirit of the law, which I actually never really thought about as far as like the letter of the law and the spirit of the law having there's nuances and subtleties. But there are people who love to take those spirit of the laws and just like throw them, like people who want to take, I don't know, emotional support animals on planes. Like, I can't remember, but some crazy animal was trying to
I'm
get
gonna
someone.
I'm
What
gonna
was it? Do you
breathe
know
because
this?
I think I have a feeling where this is gonna go. I'm gonna try and breathe. And
Why? Did I just trigger you so
no,
hard?
no, 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 not at all.
Oh,
But just because no, you didn't do anything. But
right.
just because the conversations around ESA and service dog, obviously another passion point of mine, right? Not just disability, but like the service dog piece, right? It's the education of the public is such, it's rewarding and it's great, and I do all that advocacy on behalf of Pico and myself, but having to also kind of parse those nuances, as you say, can get very, you have to be very careful. Um, and
I know. I don't
it
know
can be
enough about
tiring.
it to speak intelligently at all. I just know that there is the spirit of many laws. I'm sure that I I just know my tendency is to say, "Oh, there's probably a little bit of a loophole here. I'll just push it." I could just imagine myself doing that.
Yeah,
Um,
and the truth of it is, and I know you well enough, and our listening and watching audience may not, but I know you want to know you wouldn't, even though you said that you might be tempted to out loud. Um, but
out loud.
I don't think you would. But those nuances are
I'd
tough.
like to believe I wouldn't, but I don't know. Who knows?
Those nuances are tough. But the Cliff Notes version is service dogs are the only ones that have uh, complete and total access uh, in public settings. Uh, ESAs and emotional support animals and therapy animals have certain protections under housing laws and what have you, and some of them are at the discretion of public settings and depending where you are. And there's also the Air Carrier Access Act, which is a cousin of the ADA, which is not entirely the same but close enough.
Well,
So
I
the
feel
yeah,
I'm a little self-conscious now because I feel like I was being judgy of people who brought animals that were non-traditional animals that are
no, you're
emotional
not.
support.
But I think you're judgy too, like in a way that needs to be judgy, honestly. And I'll say that for you, because
Thanks.
like
I
if
feel
you
bad.
no, because if you don't, you end up with a Noah's Ark on your Alaska flight, and it's you don't want that, right? You don't
No.
want like you don't
Lions and tigers and bears, is that what you're talking about?
right like
And
you
snakes?
you don't want the Noah's Ark on your Alaska flight, and it all when you have animals that aren't meant to be on there because certain they're not legally defined as service animals, and they're not perform which is to say they're trained to perform specific tasks for their handler, right?
Got you.
And when you have animals that are on airlines or wherever and they're not doing those things, then it makes people like me who are trying to do that legitimately, people are questioning my credentials, right? And so that's where I think the sort of judginess, the judgment that you were kind of laughing about, I think there's a point at which that's warranted
Mm.
because it calls into question people like Pico who for CCI who did 2 years of training to get where he's at. And see, and I don't have metrics for other, they're very similar, but I can only speak for my experience and also for CCI as a brand ambassador for them. They have their own breeding program. Okay, so they're very careful about their genetics and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to foster, and they put so much research into how they run their program. And even knowing that 80% of their program uh, uh, dogs don't make the cut.
Really?
80%.
They
So
just become family pets?
they end up becoming what TCI brands as change of career, which is code for you didn't make the cut. And
Change
sometimes
of career.
sometimes those reasons are super minuscule and minute. It has nothing to do with behavior, but they might have a super small phobia, which for somebody like me might mean that I couldn't go into a certain environment. Like the bar is super high, right? Um,
Interesting.
and so that's where I think sort of the judginess is warranted because the bar is so high for what service animals do. And so when you have other folks that are abusing that and taking a vest that they bought on Amazon or wherever, or eBay, and putting it on their home pet, it calls into question the behavior of a dog like Pico, who actually went to school and got a PhD in animal behavior, right?
Wow. Interesting. And I guess sometimes I'll see dogs in, Target, and I'm like, what? Can you bring your dog in Target? I don't know what the laws are, but I think that's something I did want to talk to you about is that I think there's a phrase, no, is it ableism?
Yep,
Able-bodied, ableism.
both,
I
both. Those are both real things. Yeah.
I think I'm in the lens of looking at the world in the lens of an able-bodied person, and I don't have enough sort of, I don't even know if it's compassion, but just awareness of what it's like for you. So, what is something that you would want just in general, the general public to know to encourage people to have more thoughts beyond their own experiences? Because
Um,
that's how I would appreciate having that in front of my mind more often.
I mean, again, not to, I'm not, my public comms brain is, trying to frame this in a way that is most helpful. And my answer, frankly, may
One
not.
answer,
Yeah,
only one. I'm just
my,
kidding.
my,
No
my
pressure.
yeah,
Just whatever you think would be
honestly,
even more than one,
it's
obviously.
it. I mean, to me, it comes down to the really simple thing, which is, as with anything, it's listen to the people that are telling you the thing, right? And it's like, listen to disabled voices. We are often half jokingly referred to as like the seers, right? Because you talk about the lens by which we view the world is very different. But that's good. It gives us a perspective, just like you have your perspective, right? As an able-bodied person, we have ours, and it means that we are historically really good at seeing things that a lot of other populations don't or won't. COVID's actually a perfect example. So I'll segue into COVID for a second, right? We as a disabled community, and I say we, like we are not a monolith. I don't speak for everybody, but I'm using the royal we here, even though I'm very clear that we are not a monolith at all. But um, we saw COVID coming, like back in as early as one could, right? Like early 20
20.
or like early 2020, even late 2019, like it was still an
Yes.
international thing, and we were like, it's coming, it's coming, and most of the U.S. was like, it's over there, right? And then I remember I remember telling my boss when it started coming, I said this thing is coming, and I'm high risk, and what can we do for telework? And they said, well, get us a doctor's note. Right, I went through all these hoops to go get a doctor's note. I had just come off of surgery, so I was extra high risk because I was fresh off of surgery, on top of CP, which also makes me a high risk person, um, susceptible to infection. And it was like, get us a doctor's note. And I went through all the hoops, got the doctor's note, and the next day was a national public emergency, right?
Interesting.
And suddenly it was everybody grab your shit and go home. Uh, and then it was, and it brought to bear all these things that the disability community had been fighting for. Um, I think about, telework. We have been fighting for that forever. Suddenly, COVID made that okay. We've been fighting forever for telehealth. Suddenly, COVID made that okay. We've been fighting forever for, not to be, frowned upon for leveraging things like Instacart and DoorDash and all these things. Suddenly, COVID made that okay, right? Um, these things that were thought to be, disability, just, you guys are just lazy. You don't want to. You want to telework. You want your stuff delivered. You want this, that. Suddenly, COVID was like, oh, we need this to survive. Okay, let's make it cool. And disabled community was like, we were here first. Thanks for the credit. Like, where's our byline, right?
It's like, sounds to me what you're saying is like the able-bodied people make things that are naturally wanted on your end cool and accessible and front of top of mind and in the media. And I'm like, it makes me very actually quite sad to think that that's the case because I use DoorDash. Yeah, I use Instacart. Yeah, I telework.
I mean, I
all of it's great,
yeah, and I
but
remember even at the height of it, like I couldn't even get a delivery slot because everybody was Instacarting. And
wow.
it got really dicey because I was like, how am I going to get, if able-bodied people who, look, we all want to stay safe. I'm not going to begrudge anybody the want to stay safe. But they were at the height of it. I remember different places were setting hours for folks to go do and be, and that's not something that's feasible for me even under the best of circumstances. So folks who could have leveraged those things chose to leverage Instacart, and it put me I was like, am I going to have food this week? Like, what's going on? Right. So the short and long answer to your question is still people know the things. Like, we have been thinking and planning and trying to articulate and get people to pay attention to things for a long time. Like, you want to know what the next 6 months are going to look like, from a Omicron variant standpoint, or monkeypox, or like, talk to us. Like, we have been in the bunker forever. Like, we know how this is going to look, right?
Well, what is something that you wish would not take a pandemic to create and make cool and make happen? What is something now that you wish could happen without the drama
I mean,
and
all the things we talked about, but I think part of it now is, like, I think about how short our collective memory is as a country, right? We have these variants that are spreading around, obviously, and that's the nature of pandemics and viruses. They mutate, right? We knew that was happening, but even knowing that, we have half the country or more who's like, this is first of all, we had half the country who never believed this was a thing, right? But even among those who do believe in facts, I'm not even gonna parse it. But even the population that does believe in facts is like, yeah, we got to learn to live with it, and like, that's the nature of it, and like, we're not even gonna mask up anymore, and like, it is what it is. Like, half the country's just
everyone's gonna get it. Everyone's gonna get it
right,
at some point.
and that's the attitude that we have now. And I wrote something the other day, and I was like, the reason that so many people are shouting about learning to live with it is because they themselves can, right?
Mm.
Most able-bodied people who get COVID, assuming they're vaccinated at this point, are going to likely be okay. So their answer is learn to live with it. But again, we're discounting the 20% of the population who's disabled, and of that portion who's considerably high risk or immunocompromised, and the national response is, you're on your own. Like, what? Right now, as we're sitting here talking, can you name a national policy? And this is not a trick question. Like, I'm genuinely asking, can you name a national policy that's in place to protect the spread of COVID?
National policy, there is no mask anymore. There's um no, I can't think of any. I mean, I feel like the world is open again. I don't
Right,
actually even think about it. Like, I will go to a doctor's office because I'm in physical therapy right now. I go to a doctor's office and we used to have to wear masks, but as of like a month ago, nobody's wearing them anymore.
right. And people think that it's over, and the reality is that people like me are still terrified because we're still high risk. These things are still mutating, and the rest of the population that it's not going to affect is like, it's over. It doesn't affect me. It's fine. It's all about me. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And high risk immunocompromised folks are like, if you don't take precautions, you're impacting my health. And I, as a high risk person, if I get COVID, even though I'm double vaxxed and boosted, and I want a sticker that says, I did it, right? I'm still somebody who, if I catch this thing, it quite possibly could severely make me somebody who has a severe reaction, or God forbid, worse, right?
I didn't know the statistic of 1 in 5 people is considered disabled. And I'm sure there's, like you said, variations of, or, hierarchies of levels of disability, but that's a huge number. In my mind, I did not know
Yeah,
it was that high.
it's 20%, and I want to be careful. And I'm going to call you in, right? And
Okay.
not call you out, as I'm doing the opposite. I'm going to call you in. Um, there
Hooray.
are
Thanks
there
for
are
not calling me out.
right. I'm not. I'm going to call you in on this.
Thanks.
I'm
So kind.
just careful in the context of saying, it's, there is not, and nor should there be, a conception of a hierarchy of disability, because that would imply that one is worse than the other, that there's some sort of gatekeeping, that there's like, I have this, therefore my disability.
Comparison and contrast, it's
Like,
wrong to do.
we need to try to not do that, and sometimes, unfortunately, the call comes from inside the house, like the infighting within the disability community can sometimes be that,
Oh,
but
interesting.
we try
Interesting.
not to, right? um
Well, my apologies
no,
for
there's nothing to
putting it
apologize
across
for.
that way.
No, nothing to apologize for. But this is part of the education, right? This is part of the education piece. It's like, there's things that if you don't swim in it, like, people are always afraid of. It's like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I don't want to do. And it's like, okay, good, but also it's okay, because if we make the bar like, you say the wrong thing, we're going to cut you off. Like, there's going to be no education. There's going to be no
We're still
conversation,
friends. We're
right?
still friends, Ryan. We're
Hundred
still
percent,
friends.
100%. So no, like, but that's the way I try to make it in the conversation about education.
Well, I appreciate that because we have lots of conversations, you and I, and they are very ADD all over the place. We'll talk about one thing, go to another thing, and I never really do take a full 40 minutes to ask you kind of deep questions about what your existence is like. We talk very cerebrally, but I don't speak with you about this in particular. This is why I wanted to do this interview with you is tell me what I don't know, so that I can be a better friend to you, but also have my own little words of wisdom to share with people who may not even have an interest. But if I see something happen, I would like to be able to have education behind my words. So I appreciate you giving me, um, I don't know, grace in my missteps, because I take them to heart and I will use them
Yeah,
in a way I hope makes your world and bring an awareness to your world better.
and that's what, and I thank you for that. Like, that's honestly more of what we need. More of you. We need more of
Uh,
you, and of course, you being you is what makes you special. But we need more allies like you, because, like, we can only exist in our echo chamber of disability advocates, for so long. We need to kind of go where it's not as common or not as understood, and say, did you know this, right? And that way you're doing exactly what you're saying, which is, now you have some added pieces in your framework, and now you're going to move through the world with a little bit of extra knowledge that will, filter through your day to day, in terms
a
of being
wider lens, hopefully
wider
a
lens,
wider lens,
a wider lens,
not
and
just my target
in
lens.
fact, maybe an ADA accessible lens. It's a little wider, Um,
Who knows where this will land and what it will mean. I hope it means something to someone out there that's listening. But I also wanted to ask you if anyone wanted to get in touch with you about your work or just find out more about you in general, what would be the best way people could get
so
in contact with you?
most things about me, I don't know if we can put. Can we do like there's no editing in this. We're gonna do like a Chiron
There's
on the.
no editing. This
There's
it's
no
start start and stop.
there's no Chiron on the bottom. No,
No Chiron.
no. See, just my website, honestly, is ryanhonick.com. That's pretty much the nexus of anything that I do, because as things move and evolve, if I go to different spaces, if I go to different places, it will all end up there. Um,
Ryan, I said Ryan Honick, but it's Ryan Honick.
you know what? In my lifetime,
I'm such a good friend.
no,
I'm
I've
the best friend.
honestly, I've accepted both in my life. It's totally fine.
Just want to say thank you so much for letting me have this time with you, and I'm hoping it lands where it needs to, and I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you. You too.